One of the best things we can do at the start of each day, or like right now at the start of the week, is to be really clear what our intention is for the week. So ideally, it needs to be something that's within our control. Perhaps it's the intention to listen to others a little more. Maybe it's to not get so caught up or overwhelmed by our thinking. Maybe it's to be a little more patient. Whatever it is, again, make sure that it's something that you can commit to, something that you can choose to do, and something that feels practical, that you're able to do on a daily basis. And the clearer your intention is, the more likely it is to happen, and the more likely you are to experience the benefits. So just as a way of sort of starting that off, if you just take a moment now, just take one big deep breath, breathing in through the nose and out through the mouth. And as you breathe out through the mouth, just gently closing the eyes, feeling the weight of the body pressed down, the feet on the floor, the hands on the legs. And as you pause to enjoy that feeling, having stopped, having nothing to do, just be really clear in your mind without thinking too much about it, just clear and confident in your mind about what that intention is. So that intention requires a steady, gentle focus throughout the week. Remind yourself at the beginning of each day, at the end of each day. Don't give yourself a hard time if it doesn't happen in every moment. Just a steady, gentle commitment. Just stay with that feeling of the breath for a moment. A rising and falling sensation in the body. And then just gently bringing the attention back once again to that feeling of contact, of weight, and the space around you, the clarity of that intention. And then whenever you're ready, just gently opening the eyes again.
Beautiful. How's everyone feeling? Yay, I see lots of thumbs up. Wonderful. Good, good, good. Thank you so much for engaging with us. I haven't met you all yet, so I am glad to see your faces and some of your thumbs and your names. Just glad that you're here. So welcome again. I'm Jamila Bowden. I'm one of the TREP coaches. And so I will be with you this afternoon, and you'll see the whole team eventually. You'll see everyone popping in and out throughout the week so that we all get to meet one another. Thank you all for spending this time. I know you talked, I don't know. You may have talked more about mindfulness earlier today and this morning. That's my presumption. I would like to know, just following that, and before we jump into the next topic, where you all are in terms of ways that you would like to incorporate it into your school and into your school culture overall. So just, yeah, freely share. Where are you? What's going on in your minds? What are you thinking? How do you want to get it going at your school if you are ready for that step?
Hi, I'm Javon. I shared it briefly earlier. Sorry if you hear some jingling in the background. I have a 5-year-old.
You all understand, yeah.
Right. So ultimately, I'm currently the school counselor. I just transitioned into this role from being a dean of culture. I serve in a K-8 building. And serving as a dean of culture helped me to see a lot of deficiencies in the culture, as well as our procedures and practices. And now being in this role, I get to be a part of the raw implementation. That's it. For me, in my observation, we lacked, we had previous school counselors. What I did notice is that we lacked a universal SEL practice. And I also found that a good majority of our teachers were not culturally competent enough to support a lot of the students that we serve. Our population of students are predominantly students of color, and many of the teachers are passionate and in great positions to grow as educators. And we do understand that there is that small percentage of teachers who are still growing and progressing in their mindset and what that looks like. And so now I'm at the place where I want to help to universalize an SEL practice in the building. My focus is specifically with middle school, but knowing the culture of the building, I do believe I'll, have some insight into what the lower school will be deciding, as well as the social worker and I will work closely together.
Good. Very good. Very good. I love it. I love it. So, and do you feel like this will be an easy-ish starting place for that everyone can grab onto?
I think from a subjective standpoint, yes, because I'm not a new person to the space and to the building.
Yes.
I think challenging because of the virtual culture that we have.
Yes.
And also challenging to just personally wanting to be able to be right in the trenches and touch and be as tangible, and accepting that I cannot be as that. Yes. And then also with wanting to implement a universal SEL practice, ideally it would look nice in the building, but if that's not our model, then what does that look like effectively virtually?
Okay. Okay. Yeah. Good. Excellent food for thought, right? Excellent conversation pieces for you to be able to take back to your administration and to your team. So yeah, I love how you're thinking. I love how it's going. Anyone else? What are you guys thinking? Where do you think you will be, or where do you want to go with this for your buildings? All right. Well, I will say this. I hope that at this point, I hope that all or most of you have seen some benefit in mindfulness. As you've probably seen our structure, we use mindfulness as the door, as the kind of the gateway to enter into everything else that is a part of our structure, the structure of how we present the tools and resources, that we want to implement. So the mindfulness helps to just bring the students down to calm their minds, to calm their survival brains enough for us then to be able to even engage in all of these other pieces. So I do hope that you all are seeing the benefit, and that you'll be discussing ways with your teams and your staffs to figure out how to best implement it in your building in a way that works for you. So thumbs up on your reaction tab if that sounds workable to you. I see one. Yay. Awesome. Wonderful. So thank you so much for engaging. Oh, that's wonderful. I love it. I love it. All right, so let's actually go into our next Our next topic for the afternoon, and this will actually take us most of the way to where we're going for the day. So we're going to talk specifically about behavior and regulation, and we will jump right on in. I do want to invite you to pause me along the way, and or jump in if there's an immediate question that is burning that has to be answered at that moment. That's perfectly fine with me. You can also, of course, feel free to put your questions in the question parking lot. So we will go through this presentation, and then we'll have specific time. We'll work, do some work behind this, but then we'll have some specific time to address any questions that are in the parking lot. If you peek in there and you see some questions if you see your question has already been asked, just nominate it. You'll see how to put something next to it just to kind of help us prioritize if we are running short on time to answer all the questions. So there we are. Let's get it going. All right, so how trauma affects behavior, and you've seen some of that already. You've seen some of the brain science. So we just want to delve a little bit deeper into that so that this is on your mind as context for everything that we're going to present in terms of what to do about it. So we've seen multiple ways that trauma affects the brain, can affect development. We know that what stands out the most in classrooms in terms of behavior that appears to be challenging is the behavioral regulation, the emotional regulation, and students not having the coping skills that they need. And so we'll start with emotional regulation. We know that students who have been impacted by trauma, they're predisposed to assuming that interactions are threatening. So it's easier for them to perceive a threat when in fact there may or may not really be an actual threat to their life or to their well-being. They tend to remain constantly in some level, typically a low level state of fear that kind of goes up and down typically goes up and comes back down, but their baseline tends to be that low level state of fear focused on what could potentially be threats around them. So then even when they're not in an actual threatening situation, it's difficult for them to interpret things that looks and touches that are very standard, very benign, for them to relearn that these are not, that I am still safe, that these are not things that I have to protect myself from. So certain looks, we've all seen those kids who are very reactive and will instantly say, she was looking at me or he was looking at me. And that as the justification for why they reacted in an aggressive way, verbally or physically aggressive way. So having to relearn that some of the things that they have been taking in as threats are really just benign and normal things that happen in the course of a day, being surrounded by 30 people, 30 other beings, 30 other human beings, and exaggerated emotional responses to any stressor. So turning on that survival brain a lot more frequently. And so we've seen this, just the things that I want to point out specifically, because you were kind of introduced to this in the beginning when we were kind of setting the stage for the day. You may have seen this graphic, but the thing about these different aspects of behavior. So when we think about hyperactivity and those students who always seem to be just a little more active, and why can't they just sit down and be quiet for, for 5 minutes, that's all I need. But a dysregulated brain that is dysregulated in an ongoing, for a prolonged period of time because of multiple traumas or because of an ongoing trauma or because of a trauma that has not been processed effectively. And so those flashbacks and things that are happening can present themselves as multiple traumas, like these things are happening over and over again. So that dysregulated brain can actually reset their baseline. So the fidgety body might just be their baseline. Like they're not going to come down below that if things continue the way that they are. So without the proper interventions, that is their baseline. So the dysregulated brain can actually reset that. And so you see a lot of that impulsivity. So there is no forethought of what the consequences may be of my actions, or the fact that I may be putting myself in danger because of these actions, because again, they're operating out of that need for survival and protection. The explosive behavioral responses, that small things can really push them into a state of not only fear, but terror. So that all gripping fear. And then that denial of responsibility, where it's very difficult to see someone else's point of view. But all that's important in that moment is the fact that something else was done to them, or there was a threat, and all they did was made sure that they were staying safe and protected in that moment. When we're looking at behavior, and when we're looking at behavior that fits outside of what we consider to be acceptable in a learning context, or helpful, we have to make sure that we look at both ends of the spectrum. So on one end of the spectrum, which is easy for us to see, is the hyperarousal. And we can all identify those students, even just, visiting classrooms for 5 minutes. We see the hyperactivity, the hyperarousal, the reactivity, defiance, hypervigilance, and unable to stay seated or be still, or very irritable. We have that. But at the other end, what often falls under the radar is the hypoarousal, because at this end of the spectrum, it's not super disruptive to the proceedings of the classroom. It is the teacher's able to still continue to operate and teach lessons and attend to the needs of the classroom, because the students who are experiencing that hypoarousal, their energy level, their overall energy is going to be very low. There's either they're daydreaming, they're blanking out, they're spacing out, but they're also forgetful. They may be sleepy. They might actually fall asleep, or everything makes them tired, or there's just a lack of energy, lack of motivation. They don't want to participate, and everything is just, like everything is an extra task. They may become hyper focused on one particular thing and not able to attend to all the other things that you need for them to attend to, or they may just block out what's going on altogether. But both of these pictures are equally important to give attention to. So when we talk about coping, our students' coping resources. So when children grow up in chronically stressful environments, the coping strategies and coping tools that they use in order to deal with those stressful environments, they help them, they're helpful in those environments to protect them from harm, or protect them from whether it's physical harm or emotional harm, keep trying to maintain their psychological well-being. But in a school context, in a classroom context, those same behaviors can be what's perceived as very challenging behaviors for teachers and administrators to deal with. So what's protective in one context can be extremely challenging or difficult in another context. And we just need to remember that students' coping mechanisms and coping responses have developed for a reason. And it's always around protection. And so what we see in the classroom and the ways in which they react, those are ways that they have found to be helpful. at some point because of their experiences. And so a visual way to conceptualize that is what you see here. And so there's the stressful environment, be it in the home or in the community or both, or even isolated experiences. So those things are happening. Students learn their coping strategies, ways of dealing with just getting through these experiences, doing what they have to do just to be able to maintain, to be able to survive, to be able to keep going. But then when you put those same children and those same coping strategies in a context that is um, reasonably safe, children are using those same coping strategies, and it's not received well because it is not, they aren't necessary in accordance with that particular context. So being able to remember that students are using, so being able to remember just that what we're seeing is actually helpful for children in a certain context. And so not just looking at maladaptive coping skills, so to speak, as looking at them in one way, remembering that what we're seeing from our kids, we don't just have to throw it to the side and say that's a horrible way of coping with life, because it has served them well. And so honoring that, as honoring that also, but saying in this context, these are some other tools that we can lend you and that you can use and may be more helpful for you and for us when we're all at school. Educators also need to keep in mind that especially when students are growing up in an environment that's chronically stressful, that they may develop cognitive, emotional, and behavioral patterns that are immature for their age, even though their age they're getting older and older, but their behavioral patterns, their emotional patterns, their thinking patterns are still much further behind chronologically than their actual age. So school may be that one place where they can learn and practice a wide array of pro-social behaviors and healthy coping skills in a safe way. And so then we have to provide that for them. So the first thing we have to do in addressing all of that is really, when I went through each of them, it's really about adjusting your lens, adjusting how you see the things that you're seeing. So moving away from personalized labeling of behaviors and children. So our children are not good or bad, as we would say. And many people don't use those terms anymore, but we still do attach that to the behaviors. So behaviors being good or bad. And when they're exhibiting a certain pattern of behaviors, we do tend to label those, and we clump all the bad behaviors, and we try to address those behaviors, and in turn address the children who are exhibiting those quote unquote bad behaviors. So let's see if we can look at them differently. When we use that task-oriented labeling of those classroom behaviors, we can think of it as off-task behaviors or on-task behaviors, because our end goal is to increase their learning time. We want them to just be able to learn ultimately, so we want them to be on task. So the behaviors that we're seeing, all of the irritability and the fidgety bodies and the aggression and all of that, ultimately they're off task. The behavior is off task. So it's decreasing the likelihood that learning is going to occur. When they're on task, it increases the likelihood that learning will occur. And I hope I said decrease the first time. But there's an emotional investment in learning. They're interested, they're exhibiting effort, they're trying, they are participating, and they're trying to adhere to whatever the classroom norms and expectations and routines are. When we look at how we perceive those off-task behaviors, there's often, like, as you read through this list of how we traditionally think about off-task behavior, there's often you may notice there's an emotional reaction attached to the reading of this list, because we think of experiences that have been really, really challenging for us as teachers, as administrators, as counselors, etc. Trauma responsive, the trauma responsive view of off-task behavior is that the responses, the ways that students are responding are maladaptive in this particular context, understanding that they are adaptive outside of the school context. And so not shooting down one, just offering them more adaptive coping skills for the context that we meet them in. Trauma responsive view recognizes that a student is having difficulty regulating their emotions, not they're just blowing their tops, they're just acting out, they're so mean or angry, but they're having difficulty regulating their emotions, that they lack the self-regulation skills. And so we want to fill in those gaps. We want behavior then to become instructional by offering them some self-regulation tools and skills. We recognize that children, for good reason, may have a negative worldview. So for example, believing that adults can't be trusted. And so when we're trying to build that trust, and in particular when it's not going very well, we understand that there are reasons that students are resisting trust and trusting relationships and resisting trusting adults, period, because it is so risky. It has been a risky experience in the past. Recognizing that when students kind of flip their lid, so to speak, that their trauma response has been triggered, and we need to provide safety for them. We need to provide a sense, because things may be safe in general, but for them, we need to provide a sense of safety so that that trigger can start to turn off, and the learning brain and the rational brain and the creative brain can start to turn on and come back into the forefront and the primary way that they are operating. We know that positive reinforcement works. Sharing responsibility for our students amongst all the staff. It's not one person's job to fix students' behavior, but it has to be an all hands on deck approach. So let's talk de-escalation when things do happen. So trauma responsive de-escalation, we always start with prevention. So we want to prevent all of these things from happening, but things do happen because life is life. And so first we want to start with understanding that behavior happens in cycles. Behavior happens in a very predictable cycle of patterns, even though it seems like, man, I don't know what happened. They just went off all of a sudden. But what we know from research is that that those things that we see as happening all of a sudden, and he or she went from 0 to 10 in a matter of 0.2 seconds. But there is a pattern of it. And so we borrow from this particular model just because it's easy to recognize. So this model is called the acting out cycle. There's always a period of calm. There's something that triggers, there's a trigger. There's something that triggers this response cycle to go in motion. And then students become agitated. And so there are bodily responses, physiological responses to that agitation, and there are cognitive responses to that agitation. And so things start happening, and that's the most important place. It's hard to recognize. It may be hard to recognize when the trigger first is enacted, but you will, if you're paying attention, start to see the agitation, start to see a change in behavior, a change in attention, a change in receptiveness, a change in reactivity. And so whenever those shifts happen, it's important that they're recognized and intervened on, or, you know, there's some intervention as soon as possible before things start to accelerate. And so one of my old professors would call this period of agitation where we have a window of opportunity. And if we miss that window of opportunity, we're going to get closer to that point of no return where things then move quickly and there's going to be some peak behavior. And that's what we all see. We don't have to describe that. So that peak is where the blow up happens. But after that blow up happens, there is a period of coming down. And so the brain is starting to release chemicals that oppose the stress hormones and stress chemicals that are going through, and start to help to bring them down, even though we know that their baseline may be higher, but it starts to bring them down just from that peak blow up or emotional reaction. That's the de-escalation. And then there's a period of recovery, and they will return to calm if there's not an additional trigger. So if, when a student is sent back to class, for example, because they were sent out during that peak behavior, and they come back to class expecting to be able to go to their seat or return to their activity, but the teacher may not be ready, and she or he gives a look or gives a response or says something sarcastic, that then re-triggers those reactions to happen. So if those things are avoided and the student is allowed to just recover, they will return to calm eventually, and that can take over a day for some, but sometimes it can happen much more quickly, of course. Often when we talk about de-escalation, we're talking about responding to a crisis, but we want to also focus on preventative measures. And so one of those preventions or areas of prevention that we can get students to help us with, to help teachers with, and to help counselors and administrators is for them to be a part of this regulating process. So we can help them to join in all of this if we teach them how to self-regulate, teach students how to recognize when their bodies are responding to something, when their bodies have been triggered, when that survival response is starting to be triggered. And so they'll notice, if with teaching, with the proper instruction, they'll start to notice these physiological reactions. So their body getting warm, or they start to get shaky, or there's some, their stomach feels uneasy. There's butterflies or pains in their stomach, headaches or dizziness, clenching their jaws or clenching their fists, clenching their muscles, or even tingling in the hands and feet and things like that, or their chest feeling tight, or if they can notice their heart beating faster or beating just harder. If we can teach them to notice these signs, and then what to do when they notice those signs, letting them know that you have some options, there are things that you can do, then they can then become our partners in helping to catch behavior while it's still in the trigger and agitation phase, before things accelerate and peak. So getting them on board is one way of doing that as well. And so these just represents just an example of something that might be a teaching tool. So showing them visually what their body might be doing and giving those reminders. And then these are some things that you can try on your own to help your body to get back into a space where you can, where things are not going to blow up and where you can continue to be engaged in learning. So intervening throughout the acting out cycle, this is what it might look like. So in the calm stage, just continuing to invest time and energy in prevention. So giving students as much support as possible in being able to meet the behavioral expectations of the classroom and of the school. During the trigger phase, identifying a lot of teachers will start to learn their students' triggers. So identifying those identifying those triggers that you know of eventually, and avoiding taking measures to avoid those triggers. But also ahead of time, identifying potential triggers. Like, we know there are certain things that are likely to trigger students who are coping with trauma. And so then we not only avoid those things, but we also develop pre-correction plans to try to correct behavior before it even happens. So we're really giving them support in exactly, so not just what not to do, but exactly what to do when the teacher is asking for a certain behavior or a certain transition or a certain thing to happen, providing them with very explicit support so that they can get through that moment. During the agitation stage, recognizing that difficulty, acknowledging it, and giving them the behavioral support that they need. And there should be visuals around the room. There should be space in the room if students need to step aside and do some calming activities or just take a break. Just providing those supports for the students. During the acceleration stage, the teacher not also accelerating or becoming agitated, but remaining emotionally neutral, and understanding that the student is communicating a need, and also communicating that they are having a difficult time right now, and this is not personal, and so it's not for the teacher to take personal. If it reaches that peak stage, intervening looks like just keeping everyone safe. The student who is displaying that behavior, and all of the other students as well. And during the de-escalation time period, when they're coming down, just giving them space and time to cool out, to allow that to happen so that they can recover, and not inciting further triggers during that de-escalation or recovery period. These are some basic do's and don'ts of de-escalation. So in particular, during the acceleration and peak phases, students are highly aroused, and there's very little verbal input that you can give that they're going to be able to fully engage with and attend to. So we want to keep anything that we do say very simple and short, easy to understand, and remaining calm ourselves. Ask questions as needed, and really listen to the answers, allowing them the freedom to express their feelings and emotions, and helping to support that process, setting limits, and just reiterating rules and expectations within the context of helping them to know that you are supporting them, and that any adult, wherever they are, whether it's the classroom or the office or the dean's office or anywhere else, letting them know that you are there to support them through this challenge, offering them choices, not just giving ultimatums, not making threats, and letting them know, like, these are two choices that you have, and I'll support you in either one. Try to connect with them, so getting on the same page. So, if a student is able to say or express in some way that I was really angry about XYZ, connecting with them. You don't have to agree in order to connect, but saying, I understand how that could make you really angry, or how that could have made you really upset, or understand, so just making that connection, and letting them know that their feelings are acceptable. And working on the behavioral expression of those feelings. So don't provoke greater escalation. So don't re-trigger, don't re-traumatize. Don't argue with them. It's not helpful in any context. And don't give emotionally laden consequences, like telling them something big that's going to happen, that's going to further escalate the situation. Ultimately, responding at any point and through every point with emotional neutrality. So de-escalation strategies are going to be most effective no matter what you do if they're done with emotional neutrality while implementing those strategies. We don't always, that's not easy, basically. It's not easy to do. It's not our natural bent to respond to high energy interactions with emotional neutrality, but it is something that's necessary in order to help our students to regain a sense of safety and return to being calm enough that they can engage with us and start to bring that learning brain to the front. Emotional neutrality starts with not taking the behavior personally, because it's not about us. It's about everything that's going on with them in that moment, how they're interpreting it, what has happened in their past, the patterns that they've gotten used to, the coping strategies that they've developed over time, and on and on and on the list goes. Even though it can feel very personal, it's not about you. So that's important to keep in mind, and that will help to support us in responding with emotional neutrality. Also, maintaining self-awareness. What's going on in me? What am I feeling? Identifying our emotions, which can actually help to mediate them in the moment. Is paying attention to how our body is reacting, which a lot of those signs, if we're tensing up, if our heart is beating fast, our breathing is short, or if we're tensing up our muscles and things, children read that and they can also, match those same things. So paying attention, being self-aware, asking ourselves questions about the student and about ourselves. So what could have been the trigger? What could have set them off? And that helps lead us to know what we can do in the moment to help. Definitely take deep breaths, breathe slowly and deeply, even in the moment, because we have to remain calm in order for our students to, in order for that even to be an expectation for the students that we're talking to. That deep breathing helps to send that message to our brains that I'm okay, and I can remain calm. I don't need to go into defense or protective mode right now. I'm okay, and I can do this. So talking yourself through it is perfectly fine, and sometimes that has to happen in order to respond with emotional neutrality. When we are in the midst of an escalated situation, what we need to do in regard to the students is attend to their body cues, let them pay attention to what is happening with them, physically and physiologically, those things that we can see. Pay attention to those signs, and to be able to predict, to be able to not predict, but to be able to give us some clues about what is going to happen or which direction this interaction is going, and to make those adjustments. And because de-escalation actually starts after the peak behavior or the peak event. So at the very first signs of when you have that window in, when there's about to start coming down, and they can actually start to hear you. So that sign may look like, or they may drop their shoulders, or their short breathing might become a little bit longer. So their chest may heave, but that is in opposition to that really short, rapid, shallow breath. And so when you see those signs, you can invite them then to take a deep breath and to start engaging the practices that you all have been practicing. So make some attempts then to guide the students, using a very calm voice and tone, helping them to match where you are, helping them to come down, to start doing some of the things that are going to put them back into the recovery space. Make sure that, like I said, that there is a space in every classroom, and actually I often promote every space throughout the building needs to have a place where students can step aside and engage in some of their self-regulation activities where they can just separate from what's going on for a moment, or um, it's not always necessarily a separation from what's going on, but sometimes they do need that separation, that space to just be able to step to the side and close their eyes, or whichever calming strategies they have or self-regulation tools they have to be able to just engage with that, even if it's just taking some breaths. Realizing that not every situation is one that can be handled alone. So asking for support when needed, whenever needed, and not feeling bad about having to have support, whether you're the principal or the counselor, or the dean, it doesn't matter. If you need support, ask, and have a system in place for getting support if a student is highly agitated, or their behavior is escalated. So have a system already in place for maybe having another student to go and get help, or whatever the case may be in your particular context. Have that plan in place, and have that for your teachers as well. Reestablishing the safety of the class then, so directing your teachers that after an event happens, after a student blows up or there's a fight or something of that nature, it doesn't only affect the students who were directly involved, but it impacts the environment. It impacts all of the students and everyone around. And so, including the teacher and any other adults that were involved, it impacts everyone. And so reestablishing safety, acknowledging that this thing just happened and we may all be feeling a certain way. Let's all do a short mindfulness practice. Let's all just take some deep breaths right now to remind ourselves that we are in a safe place, that we're okay, and we're going to get through this together, like that kind of thing. So reestablish safety of the class, and definitely don't try to ignore what happened, because the other students are thinking about it. It's on their minds. And for some of them, it may be a trigger for them. And for other students, it may trigger anxiety, it may trigger fear, or that terror response, or flashbacks for them. And so it's important to acknowledge it and engage in a practice that's going to help to bring them down as well. For the agitated student, we want to re-engage them as soon as possible, as early as possible, not pushing it before they're ready, but making sure that it's possible when they are ready, and engaging them right away, just back into the learning environment in a way that they can be successful. Excuse me, and then debriefing with that agitated student at some point when they have had a chance to recover and return to calm. And that can take up to 24 hours or more to fully recover for some students. So it may be the next day that you all decide on a time that we're going to sit down and talk about what happened, or just process through what happened, and maybe what we can do if those feelings start to rise the next time. And then we follow up with whatever the school's procedures are for the follow-up. So what I'd like to do is briefly take a few minutes for you to talk together with either some other principals or with your teams. When schools do reopen, what are some of the predictable classroom behaviors that you might expect? I want you all to think together through ways that these behaviors can be prevented. So what are some preventative measures that can be taken within your school, or that you can direct for teachers to have in place? And then as a school, what are going to be some of those non-punitive measures that your school is going to take so that students are not continually re-traumatized, and so that we're not punishing these behaviors, but supporting them in having behaviors that are going to be helpful for them in the context of the school. So I'll put this back up in a second, but I want to come back to you for a moment. All right. Let's see, Allie. Do we have rooms already set up, breakout rooms?
It'll have to be 1 second, but yes, my internet keeps dropping in and out.
Okay. Okay, no problem, no problem. Yeah, so yes, so those are the two things. We're going to chat about that just briefly, probably no more than 7 minutes or so, and we'll come back in here and see just share some ideas for what we came up with, and just to get the ball rolling in terms of thinking about how it can be, how we can change our schools to more effectively address behavior in a way that is responsive to their trauma, their needs based on their trauma, and supportive in teaching our kids, what some of those more adaptive skills can be. So you can start thinking about that while she's getting the rooms set up, and I will put that slide back onto the screen.
Okay, so everybody got a breakout room invite except Javon, I guess the people who are in breakout rooms have been put into by their schools.
Okay. Yep. And so these are with the team. You're on mute, Allie.
We are okay, Amanda and Javon. I'm gonna put you guys in a room together. Sounds good.
Okay.
It's a smaller group this time.
Yeah. And is that Angel in the A?
Yeah.
All right, awesome. No, I still had it on share, so I wasn't sure if that was you or a participant. All right, I'm hot. I'm going to turn my air on. I'll be right back, and then I'll visit.
I was literally brushing my teeth, and I was like, "Oh wait, the time."
Oh my gracious. Okay.
I'm gonna go finish that.
Okay. Yes, go finish that. We're just gonna give them like 5 minutes in there. 5 more minutes. Hey, Miss Angel, how you doing?
I'm doing well. How are you?
Good. I haven't seen your face this whole time.
Let's see. I can cut my camera on. Wait.
Yeah.
Oh, here we go.
Yay. Hello. I sure can.
I can't see myself.
Yeah. Oh, you can't see yourself. Wow.
Well, I think because I still see your screen, maybe.
Oh, maybe. I don't know. So how how'd you find it to be last week? Like, did you learn a lot? Was it interesting? Was it boring?
No, it was really good last week. I enjoyed it. There are a lot of things that I didn't consider. I think Shannon brought up a really interesting point about how for a lot of students, school is like the safest place that they know.
Mhm.
And I'm like, that's really important. So especially in the conversations about whether or not school will be virtual or not, for a lot of students, like of course our like health and safety is really important, but for a lot of students, like school is a very integral part of their mental health.
Exactly. Yes.
And it's like if you don't like being at home, or like if home is a really scary place,
Exactly.
going back to school is like, your sense of peace.
Right. That's so important, and that's huge, for us to consider. I mean, there are drawbacks, both ways. Like, people are like, get them back in school, because home is not safe, and then we have this other thing that's not safe as well, but just in a different way. And it's so hard, it is incredibly hard, as a balancing act, because there's only so much you can do while they're
Very true.
at home. Okay, is it time? Where's my phone? Okay.
It is 1:28.
Okay, let's give them, is it like a 2-minute countdown, or what is that
It
countdown?
takes a minute to, it gives them a minute to get out of their breakout rooms.
Okay, yep, so in 1 minute, let's give them their minute to come out.
Okay.
Actually, no, we can do it now. Yeah, so we'll finish kind of in time.
Okay.
Yeah, so go ahead and give them their minute now and come back together.
Okay.
Thank you.
Are you in Chicago? Is everyone in Chicago?
Yep. Well,
I'm in New Orleans.
Oh, nice. Love it.
Hot, very hot.
Yes.
Wow.
Blast and heat.
Wow. Are they open? Is everything open there,
No, unfortunately we went a little bit backwards too.
Okay. Yeah. No, I'm glad. Not that you went backwards, but that it's not open. Like, yeah, we need to go back. Yeah, it's so sad about that.
It's really sad because I went to college here and I worked here for a few years before I went to get my master's, and then ended up in Chicago. And, for me, New Orleans is very much like home, and I've just seen so much of this city change. It's something I'm really sad to see, that the culture was so based on human connection and interaction and good food, and everything's just closed.
Yeah, right. In here, absolutely.
Through thick and thin, we'll make it.
I know we are going to get through this. We all will. Welcome back. I see some coming on in. Very good. I know that wasn't long, but I hope that it was productive. Let's see, and we'll just wait for the other rooms to close, so that everyone is back. Oh, good. I think that might be everyone. So I know that wasn't long, but I am still excited to hear where you are. Like, what was the conversation, and what ways are you looking to make some shifts within your building? So, oh no, that's not what I meant to do. All right, so let me, if it's okay, if you like have some kind of, if you don't want to be called on and I call on you, just tell me. Like, that's perfectly fine. I was just gonna pick some names at random, and let me know how things went in your discussion. So how about Mr. Esteves?
Yes, Jason.
All right.
Thank you.
Yeah. How did the conversation?
It was good, short, but
Yeah, I know. Sorry. Yeah.
We discussed taking a more practical approach to I guess, crisis, the way we respond the ways we respond to crisis as a team, and kind of the culture that we've kind of been accustomed to in the school building. And the best way to do that is to, as a team, change our approach, be more practical with our approach, but also working with teachers, whether it's pushing into a classroom or working with the teachers or direct staff, in a more meaningful, practical manner.
Okay. Okay. Wonderful. Wonderful. So when you say be more practical in your approach, is that I'm assuming specifically your approach to discipline. So being more practical looks like, what does that look like?
Oh, I mean, I guess the culture that we've been used to, and is kind of just the way things have settled since we've been in the building, is that it's been in the past it's been a responsive approach, right? Something happens, and now everyone's scattering and trying to, put out a fire, for lack of a better term, but changing gears and taking more of a preventative approach, right? So I think for Tima, I think that was the best way to put it: preventative as opposed to responsive.
Very good. Very good. Love it. Okay, great. Thank you so much for sharing. How about, I can't, Miss Rebecca, I can't see your last name on my screen for some reason.
Yeah, that's okay. Valenzuela.
Valenzuela. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So how did it go? Unless you were in the same group.
Yep, we were in the same group.
In the same group. How about Ms. Singleton?
Yes. So I think the biggest takeaway from our conversation was just how challenging it's going to be because of our current situation, like how we're not sure what the hybrid might look like if we're going to be in the building, and all these different triggers.
Yep.
And so what would have been a trigger in our everyday school has now been challenged. And so we were thinking, like, one of the biggest things is physical contact, and how we can address that, how we can create norms for our classrooms and just for our interactions with students. And one of the biggest things that we've done already, but we want to make a more school-wide norm, was thinking about what norms look like as a class with the students, so that they have some input.
Oh, good. Excellent. And then school-wide, has there been anything that we've talked about today that you all would consider wanting to do school-wide as in this context? So either as preventative measures or supporting students through these challenges.
I've really appreciated the integration of self-regulation, skill building, how it's been modeled through this training today, and how, like, I don't want to say easily, but just the thing that was stuck for me was like the amount of time that we spend responding to behavior, as opposed to like using that time to model, self-regulation skills and build various skills throughout the day and throughout the week for our kids. Yeah.
Very good. Yeah, thank you. Absolutely. And then I would like to hear from, so there's no name attached to your picture, but you have a nice little, actually there are two nice selfies, but the person with the red shirt on her selfie, who's that?
Antoinette. I was in the same group as Bronte.
Okay, all right, awesome. How about the other selfie? The other pretty picture with the glasses, who is that? I don't have a name, the name is not popping up.
It's Paula. I was in the same group with Antoinette and Bronte, but I will add something else that actually Antoinette had shared that kind of resonated with me in terms of students during when remote learning first started in the spring that were beginning to disengage. And that could be for a variety of reasons, and ways that we can try to begin to explore with them, you know, what some of that is about in the event that they have the ability to kind of articulate it, because that can be challenging during the middle school years, and figure out ways where not only we can just re-engage, but also try to create some scaffolds that would support that, as opposed to it turning into, you know, what some previous situations had been, that may have felt more punitive to the students than maybe we would have realized as staff. And kind of thinking through what those pieces might look like, because if it is a hybrid model, we may have some of that via Zoom or whatever, you know, platform that other schools are using. And there also might be a manifestation of that returning to the building due to safety measures, and not feeling like this is the place that I've been all of this time because of the realities of COVID.
Right, right. Very good. Yes, yes, absolutely. Thank you so much for sharing. And then and I should know your name because we talked about it right before the break. The one with the flower, the person has a flower picture.
Oh, that's me, Amanda.
Amanda, yes, Amanda.
I was with Javon, and we first got to know each other a little bit. And then we talked a lot about her school and how they're moving from, you know, doing more punitives to restorative practices. So they're really working on being more restorative. And we talked a lot about, at the end there, teacher self-care, and really helping teachers to have a good, you know, understanding of their own ACEs and their own traumas, and working on their own self-care practices to help them in those moments where we are dealing with traumatized kids.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. Love it. So very good. Ms. Javon, did you want to add, Ms. Brown, did you want to add anything to that? Okay. You were on mute, but I saw you say no.
Sorry. No, she got it up.
All right. No, thank you all so much for engaging. And those are all really, really important considerations. I'm sorry you didn't have longer. I wanted to make sure that we left enough time for the question parking lot. There is actually nothing in the question parking lot for us, which means hopefully that you have been getting your questions answered throughout the day. So I wanted to, what I do want to say in response to most of your feedback is I'm glad that you all are thinking in terms of, we want you to continue thinking in terms of prevention and resisting re-traumatization. And so there is actually, I did forget something. And let me share this with you really quick. So this is the model. Tell me if, gosh, no one has on their screens, or you could just use the reaction button. Have you seen this? Have you seen this graphic already today? You have. Okay, perfect. So this is really what we want you to be thinking in terms of assessing where you are and where you have to go. Thanks for the feedback. So using this as the model. Have you workshopped it already? Like, have you actually done some work around these 4 hours today?
No, it was just introduced.
Okay, perfect. So, so making sure that all of your teachers, all of your staff is in a place where they have the understanding of how trauma affects the brain, how trauma affects our students, how they're using that different lens. So they're realizing more and more how it's the trauma that's behind so much of what we see, probably most of what we see in students' behavior and their challenges in cognition and executive function and learning and their emotions emotional dysregulation and their lack of coping skills and all of that, their lack of productive coping skills for our context. So realizing what all of that means and those intersections of inequality and trauma. So all of the many manifestations of poverty and the effects that it has on where our students are in terms of equity and in terms of them being traumatized, in terms of their community, the community trauma and the collective trauma that they experience daily, and how that then impacts how they come to school and what they have to give, you know, when they come to school. And then realizing where those assumptions and biases really that we personally carry, and that's different for every single member of your staff, and how that impacts the way that we go about our daily interactions with our students. The staff being able to identify when students are dysregulated. So they're not bad kids, you know, they are children, they are human beings that are reacting in the ways that they are supposed to react to trauma, to traumatizing events, or potentially traumatizing events, without the proper supports and resources around them. And so they're doing exactly what they're supposed to do, but they're dysregulated, and being able to recognize misbehavior, quote unquote, as dysregulation, and recognize when students are showing very low level signs of dysregulation so that we can intervene even sooner. And then responding in ways that are instructional, that are strength-based, that understand that we need to give students time and physical space, and recognizing our own regulation plays a big part in the escalation or de-escalation of these occurrences that we're having. Being able to be non-punitive in our behavior, in our discipline practices, and being able to ultimately maintain student engagement. So changing all these lenses and assessing where we are and how far we have to go, and changing our practices and our procedures, changing our lens, all comes down to, and skill building, all comes down to not re-traumatizing our students. Our schools traditionally have been places, even though they tend to be the safest places that many of our students have to go, but at the same time, they tend to be re-traumatizing in many, many ways. So for example, students, particularly the older kids, you know, middle school and high school, some of them are doing the best they can. They are dealing with so many things, you know, and they really give it their all. They get to school and they're, you know, 15 minutes late, and they walk in the building and there's someone yelling at them because they're late, and where you've been, and, you know, where have you been? Go to the office. You know, you need to get a pass. You know, this is your, you know, they go to the office to get a pass, and the, you know, clerk is saying, this is your, you know, your 7 tardy. You have detention this Friday, you know, and they go to detention and they're getting fussed at because they're in detention, and, you know, it's just, we unintentionally do a lot of emotional harm and damage to our students just in the typical ways that we respond and react to the ways in which they act and interact with life. And so putting all these pieces together to try to resist re-traumatizing our students is a huge, huge piece. And so hopefully throughout the week, we'll have more time, and you'll have more time to really talk about what that looks like, where you are, and how do we get from where we are to where we're going. There is a whole assessment for administrators around these 4 R's that breaks it down, you know, into even smaller bites or smaller chunks for you to really actually give yourself a rating on, you know, how your school is doing. And it's a rubric, so that if you know that we're right here at this place today, you know, at a number 2, these are the things that we have to, this is how we move, to get to a higher rating just for ourselves. It's not, it's not for anyone else. It's just for your own practices. And so we'll probably, I'm assuming, be sharing that with you later in the week, or at least for you to be able to take home with you. But right now, before we end, just for about a little less than 10 minutes, we'll just come in and we'll jump in and let you know we're coming back. I would like for you to talk for, let's say, 4 minutes. So you're going to time, so somebody be the timekeeper in your group. Allie, we're going to use those same breakout groups. So someone be the timekeeper in your group. I'd like you to talk for 4 minutes about ways that that practices in your schools may have been unintentionally contributing to re-traumatization of your students. And then I'd like you to talk for 4 minutes about ways that you can take those same practices and just turn them around. How can we flip this very easily to make it so that it's not re-traumatizing? And that means having everybody involved. So does that sound? I have to pull you back in. You know what you can do, because I know you can, I don't think you can see this when you're in your groups. Someone can take a screenshot of this really quickly, and then you'll have it while you all are discussing. So is that okay? Thumbs up. You all know what you're doing. 4 minutes about the actual practices that may be re-traumatizing unintentionally, and then 4 minutes on how you can flip those around. Cool? All right, Allie, can you take us away?
Rooms are open.
Oh, good. All right, fantastic. Cool beans. They made it. They all made it.
Rebecca, did you get your invite? Oh, there you go.
She moved in, yeah. I know, right? You remember last week, especially by the end of the week, people had just left their computers. Oh man.
Yeah, or like yeah, Leah, how we could never get her into a breakout room ever. I felt so bad.
Oh my gosh. I was right about the parking lot, right? I didn't see anything in there. I want to make sure I wasn't skipping over.
No, I think you're right too. I mean, I'll check again real quick, like refresh the page. But most people have just been answering or like asking questions freely as we go through lessons, anyway. So
nice. That's good. That's good. That is helpful. All right.
Yeah, it's empty for me.
Okay. All right. Perfect. Thank you. All right. We are almost there. So
that's right. Also, this group knows how to use reactions.
Say it again. Say it again.
This group knows how to use reaction.
Oh yeah. Yes, I'm glad. I like that. I appreciate that.
Anyway, what were you saying?
Oh, I know what I was about to say. At 56, I think it was. I didn't note the time that you sent them exactly in. But I think at 56, did you happen to notice by chance? I think it was like 148 when you sent them in.
We're gonna appreciate any extra minute.
I didn't hear you.
Sorry, my internet's so hot. I said no, I don't know, but I do think that they will appreciate extra time.
Oh, okay. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Cool beans. So let's see, at 56, at 56, give them, if you could give them their 1 minute countdown, and then they can come on back. Yeah, because it's not that much that much time to work with things. Excuse me.
Angel, in your text, did you mean Isidore Newman?
Yeah, Isidore Newman.
Yeah, that school is so nice.
Yeah, it's very nice. Very, very nice. Yeah, it's a very nice place. And I stayed at Tulane while I was there, so.
Oh, yeah, then you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah, it's a very very freeing and lively, I don't know, just a very free and lively city. I'm from North Carolina, so we don't do as much walking. But I just really enjoy walking around Tulane and around the city, and then even walking in Chicago. I enjoy that too.
Yeah, lots of walking. But it is pretty. Oak trees and how they overhang. We're still talking about New Orleans, Jamila, by the way.
Yeah, I know.
But the oak trees and how they just overhang.
I'm surprised that you all have oak trees. I have been there. I've been to New Orleans when I was in college, so 100 years ago. But I had never heard of a praline before coming to New Orleans, and changed my life. No, pralines in conjunction with what is that? It was a ice cream shop that was in the French Quarters, and they had pralines on their counter. And I'm like, oh, what's this? And he told me, and they had the pralines and cream ice cream. That changed my life. Yes.
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
So good.
Yes. All right. We can reel them back in for a moment so we can say Tulu.
Sounds good.
Cool. Awesome. Yay. Welcome back. Welcome back. Welcome back. I trust that you had some excellent discussions in your breakouts. I'd like for, as we just prepare to go, thank you so much for engaging. I'd like for each of you, if you are willing, to share one takeaway for the day that you would like to keep in your pocket and continue to talk about and think about, with your own teams also. So one takeaway for the day. Let's start in reverse alphabetical order. Let's see. All right, let's start with so Miss Fatima, you have to tell me, is Zara part of your last name or your middle name? Because that'll depend on whether you go first or
Thank you so much for asking. No one ever asks. I am trying to have it be part of my first name, but you can call me Fatima for the sake of this training.
Okay. All right. Thank you. So so then, Ms. Walker, you are up. You're up first.
To find my mute button. I think for me, the biggest takeaway was your visual on de-escalation, the acting out visual.
Acting out cycle, yeah.
Yeah, that was really big for me. I'm a big visual person, and your window of opportunity that you talked about right there when they're in the agitation stage.
Yeah.
That was really big for me. So thank you.
I'm glad. Thank you. Thank you. When someone shared that with me, that was huge for me. I'm like, oh yeah, that makes sense. I got it. And Mr. Wilson, sorry, you should have been first. I skipped you. I apologize. Yes.
Totally fine. One of the things I'm leaving thinking about was, we talked a little this morning about kind of proactively about and setting up norms for this new reality of not being able to come close to each other and not being able to hug, and just kind of hopefully all the things that we can avoid by being really clear and explicit and reminding kids repeatedly as they come to the room, and then all of them collaborate in the process of how those norms develop, but just thinking really proactively about the very physical norms of the ways that we're going to be when we come back.
Yeah, that's huge. That's a huge piece that I'm hoping districts really come together to solve that issue, together, so that it looks, similar and is as trauma responsive as possible across the board. So that it's not just, one school is doing it right and everybody else is just traumatizing their kid, re-traumatizing their kids all over the place. So yeah, absolutely. Thank you for sharing that. Ms. Valenzuela, I like saying that.
Oh, thanks. Well, one of the things that I'm really thinking about is, how do us as a team, none of us are teachers, but we're, I guess, support staff. And how do we empower the teachers in our school with the tools they need to not re-traumatize our children? And how do we change the language around mental health and the things that we say every day to our children to help them be more uplifting instead of more condemning? So it's kind of like, you know, if we're able to change the way we speak to our kids, that'd be great. But then how do we get our whole school to do the same?
Yes. And that becomes you know, part of your planning, because it definitely can be done. It's so crucial and important. And so that becomes, yeah, one of your norms, one of your cultural norms. So the environment that we want to set here, and these are things that we have to be intentional about doing, and not,
yeah, and intentional too. That's the thing.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, thank you so much. All right, Ms. McMillan Perez.
I have a couple of things, so I'll try to be brief. I really appreciated all of the very clear visuals. Even though a lot of this information isn't new to me, I feel like for the purposes of turnkeying to other like staff members or teachers who may not have had as much exposure or experience, it's going to be definitely helpful. And even thinking about the framing of, you know, all the layered plans that we're all going to have to come up with students, kind of like anchoring it to this is going to be, at least I feel, a lot easier because of the visuals. And I was just thinking about like the trauma responsive de-escalation, especially for individuals who might work with kids in like different levels, because, you know, if we are going back into buildings and hybrid models, you know, for schools that ever get to a point where they use like physical de-escalation, that goes out the window right now. So we need to basically find ways to basically train and retrain and continue to support ourselves in utilizing these techniques. That way, not only are we making sure that kids are mentally safe, but they're physically safe, and so are we.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, thank you so much. Thank you so much for sharing. Mr. Estevez, say it for me so I can say it right, with the right accent.
Estevez.
Estevez, got it.
Thanks. Well, I have a lot of thoughts, but something that stuck out to me and even was part of our team conversation was the trauma responsive perspective. How, you know, when addressing behavioral corrections, do it in a positive manner, but just the overall emotional climate of you know, our approach to dealing with behaviors or just trauma in general, and being mindful of our presence in the building. So that's something that stuck out. I look forward to working with.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much. Miss Brown. Yes.
Can you hear me? Okay. I think the visuals, as many have already shared, have been really powerful. I'm a visual learner, so it helps to kind of stick there. But I can say the resisting re-traumatization landed for me, and the mention of the fact that post-traumatic growth can occur. I thought that was pretty powerful. It's actually not something I've heard mentioned often, or at least unpacked. And I feel like that is a way for teachers to also kind of, something Amanda and I were talking about, for teachers to have buy-in, really thinking forward about how growth can occur and all of the steps that it takes so that growth can occur.
Good, excellent. Thank you so much for sharing. And then we'll just do Ms. Fulweir and Ms. You'll have to tell me how to say it, Ms. Fatima.
Oh, no worries. It's Miss Amar.
Amar. Thank you.
No worries.
All right. Actually, why don't Ms. Fulweir may not be connected. Why don't you go ahead?
That's me, Angel.
Okay. Oh, that's you, Angel. Okay, never mind. Ms. Amar, if you could go ahead.
Thank you. Just want to say, really appreciating this space and the time I've spent with all the presenters today, and feeling very thankful. Yeah, I'm leaving feeling energized around this idea that, you know, a trauma-informed practice and framework can be can offer a healing space for our students and families. And for me, what I keep hearing is like at the core is this harnessing and cultivation of relationships that I feel like is missing for me, at least in our school context. I always, one of my professors have said this to me during my grad school experience, which is that rupture is always an opportunity for repair. And I feel like I see a lot of students rupturing and there is never any repair, just consequences or removal or really severe consequences. And yeah, today's made me feel really hopeful about moving to a place of hopefully more repair and healing.
Absolutely. I love it. Thank you all so much, so much. So this warms my heart, and I'm so glad that you have these takeaways and for your contributions. I'm really grateful. So we look forward to seeing you bright and early first thing in the morning. Thank you so much for sharing and just being a part of community so we can do what we need to do to help our kids. So we'll see you tomorrow. Thanks so much. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Have a great rest of your day.
Thanks so much.
Thanks. Enjoy the rest of your day and stay hydrated.